10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Pub Politics, live from Chapel Bar, 147 Ponsonby Road. So bloody excited that you have joined us this evening. Tonight, we discuss, does the National Party of Aotearoa deserve to win the 2020 election? Good evening to everyone who's watching us live stream on the Daily Blog, the Evening Report, and of course, Brian Bruce's Public Television Network. Congratulations for joining us this evening. There's absolute shit on every other network, so thank you. Tonight we have an all-star panel lineup, ladies and gentlemen. Sunday Star columnist, my co-panelist on Magic Talk Radio, and fringe libertarian, a man that no one should have to know, the very brilliant and funny Damien Grant, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Martin.
The next leader of the Labour Party, I said it, I told you I would, People's Revolutionary Hero and Auckland City Councillor, Efeso Collins, ladies and gentlemen. Former leader of the Labour Party, great mate of mine, thank you for coming along, making his first appearance back in the media spotlight this evening, David Cunliffe, ladies and gentlemen. And the finance spokesperson for the National Party, he's written more right-wing books than Donald Trump, which isn't really saying much because Donald Trump doesn't write very well. Ladies and gentlemen, the Right Honourable Paul Goldsmith. Paul, let's kick things off. Now, you released a 40-page economic plan last week that promises to burn 2 pieces of legislation for every 1 piece you pass. Isn't that a tad ideological? I mean, what if the other pieces of legislation are necessary? Will you decide randomly what legislation gets amputated? Like you pass legislation on tax reform and then you just dump laws on car seat belts. What are you doing? What are you doing?
We're sending a signal. We're sending a signal that there's too much regulation and we're going to bowl it out. We're going to have a bonfire of the regulations when we get a chance.
A bonfire of the vanities, I believe you called it.
I think the regulations. But I'm supposed to answer the question, aren't I? Should National win the next election? And the answer is yes.
Well, that's a little presumptuous.
I think we can deal with all the other things related.
Didn't you get this idea to burn 2 laws for everyone you pass from Donald Trump?
I think it was the Canadians who did it first. Justin Trudeau.
But Donald Trump picked it up?
Oh, yeah, well, he's picked up all sorts of ideas, yes. But some of them are good, some of them are bad.
Are you going to build a wall?
Not at the short term.
Across the
That's
Bombay
kind of
Hills.
concerning. David, taking policy ideas from Donald Trump, who wants to nuke hurricanes, seems, what's the words I'm looking for, Paul? Criminally negligent. But Paul wants a bonfire of red tape, yet doesn't mention climate change once in his 40 pages. Won't his bonfire add to our carbon footprint? How can you have an economic plan that doesn't acknowledge climate change?
Well, I guess the carbon emissions from the bonfire won't be the worst problem.
You haven't read the environment document as well. That's another 40 pages.
That's a lot of pages.
Paul's a bright guy, so we are hoping that sometime between that version of the plan and the plan he brings to the election, there'll be a few new ideas, including recognition that climate change changes pretty much everything, and it will affect New Zealand fundamentally.
Paul, does your party believe in climate change?
Obviously, there's clearly climate change going on, yes.
Yeah, that doesn't kind of answer the question, though, does it?
Yes, it does.
Do you believe that man-made climate pollution is creating climate
There
change?
clearly seems to be some influence on the climate going on. The extent of it, who knows?
Some influence. Kind of, yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of wriggle room there. Do you believe in it or not?
Is this a religious question? Or
Well, no, I mean, if you don't believe in climate change, are there any other ideas you don't believe in? Like anti-vaxxum? I mean, I just want to know whether or not National is a science-based party or
I'd like
not.
to declare here and now I don't have measles.
Okay, no measles yet. Professor, when Paul's mates were in power last time, they actually did hold a rules reduction task force to look into cutting all this red tape. that Paul hates. And here is what the National Task Force concluded last time. It was a surprise to us to find out that a number of the loopy rules are in fact just myths. They are misinterpretations and misunderstandings that have been repeated so often that they have taken on the status of facts. Paul's red tape myth is a bit like UFOs and the Loch Ness Monster, aren't they? They're just scary stories that right-wingers tell children before bedtime. Go to sleep or the RMA will get you.
Yeah, what we've seen is we've seen the most number of consents go through in the last few years, more than we've had in over a decade. So we are getting through the red tape. Look, there's things that we need to accomplish. And I think it's really important that we work alongside everybody to get those things accomplished. And I think we can be really ambitious for the city, for the nation as well. You know, the whole point of climate change, Auckland Council declared a climate change emergency. We know that it's happening. The science backs it up completely. And so it's really important that we work alongside everybody so we can get these consents through.
But is there this mountain of red tape that National seem to believe? I mean, their task force that they put together last time said, nah. That's what they said. They officially, nah.
Yeah, we've come out with a document that says this is how you get through the red tape. And I think we've got to be really careful. The National Party, you know, I have respect for anyone who stands for public office. That's the nice way
very
of trying
kind.
to put
That's
it.
very
Thank you.
kind.
But they've gone after Auckland Transport and Auckland Council on everything. And I think they should focus on the national issues and let us work through what the local issues are here in Auckland. So let the National Party do their thing. They can correct whatever their imbalances are and let Auckland councillors get on with the work of getting Auckland moving again.
Damien, you are a crazy libertarian.
Thank
You love National. You love Paul Goldsmith.
I think we're
And you see his 40-page economic plan as a glorious blue dawn for the free market, don't you?
Well, no, I wouldn't have said it that. But I was interested. You're talking about Paul getting rid of regulations. Well, I mean, the big one I'd like to see got rid of is the anti-money laundering legislation that was actually brought in by the last government. So you're talking about regulations. You've got the RMA, which National had the opportunity in the first 3 years of John Key's centre-left administration, failed to get rid of the RMA. And look, it was a beautiful blueprint. I have to say, it was fantastic. But at the very core of the blueprint, it said, we need a strong, vibrant economy so we can have excellent public service, which is an absolute standout policy document had it come from the Labor Party.
So just clarifying, would Damien get rid of the anti-money laundering legislation?
Yes,
You like money laundering?
obviously.
Good luck with that.
Paul,
You're not running for office anywhere anytime
No,
Sorry.
answer, no.
sorry, Paul. Damien is to the right of Caligula. The economic policy of National's last 9 years in power was sell cheap milk powder to China and keep high immigration to prop up the speculative property bubble so that the middle classes all felt they were millionaires on paper.
You're very,
Isn't that a
cynical.
one-trick pony that needs a trick and a pony?
Look, any successful economy does lots of things. And we had 9 years of great progress with John Key and Bill English, and the country grew well, and we want to keep that going. But you can't just sort of turn around as this government and says, no, there's only 2 countries in the world that we've been able to find that are so rich that they don't need to look for oil and gas, and it's us and France. And we're so rich that we don't need to look for gold, apparently. And so they keep taking all these things away, and then you can't make a living. So, you know, we're just saying lots of things. Any successful country does lots of things and works hard to make a living.
But how are you going to be able to follow that up for another decade if those ideas don't work anymore?
Well, you come up with new ideas. That's the point. The economy's constantly evolving. New Zealanders are very adaptive. They come up with all sorts of different things that you wouldn't have expected. Nobody would have gone off and come up with a project or a plan to send rockets from New Zealand or to create a software company from New Zealand. People do all sorts of things we don't expect, and that's how it works.
So will you see and will you champion a move away from the agricultural industry into new tech?
People will go where it makes sense to go. It's not for the government to decide where they have to go and what they should do.
But the government does set the marketplace.
There's 7 or 8 billion people in the world. They set the marketplace and they decide what they want, and it's our job to make sure that we're competitive and we can sell stuff that the world wants. And it's a hard business, I tell you.
David, the vast majority of our milk powder is sold as a base ingredient to mass-produce food. The millisecond that synthetic milk powder can replace our organic product at a fraction of the price means National's previous game putting all our cows in one Beijing paddock, that's over, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I think you make a
We have a technical
bit of
problem there.
feedback. So let that subside.
Hey, I'll do the talking while you've got a reverb.
That's all right. I'll borrow your mic. I wonder why that's happening.
Put that one down. Come on this
Right, that one. All right, so the issues with that are, firstly, synthetic proteins are coming quite quickly. It's New Zealand's interest to build a premium brand for natural food products and charge a lot for them so we can support the living standards we want. That's what we want to do. And to do that, we need innovation, we need technology, we need branding. What we don't want to do is be the faceless ingredient in somebody else's Snickers bar or leather shoe cement or some other product where no one will know where it's made and where a substitute can do just as well. And look, I really would like to see from whoever's going to be the new government, and hopefully you won't be surprised about my leanings, the current one gets another term, a strong innovation
No chance.
policy rather than pinning one's hopes on doubling trade with one country.
Do you think that idea of just doubling trade with China, I mean, this year they came out and said that they wanted 50% of their own product to be in dairy. They wanted their own milk powder. That sort of limits our ability to get anything more into there, doesn't it?
Look, I believe in a mixed economy, which is that you, to a certain extent, you let the free market work as long as the government sets the boundaries. And what troubles me with National's paper recently published was that it does two things. It promises to liberalise foreign investment by a high degree, while also promising to double trade with one major trading partner. I think that is concentrating risk, and I think what we need to be doing is thinking about New Zealand ownership of its value chains, New Zealand production of high-value products where we make the margin and our people share in the benefit.
Feso, how was National's rockstar economy for the communities that you represent? Could they hear the music in the cars?
No, what they hear in their cars is the fact that they can sleep in it, so they're hearing snoring in the cars. They're hearing each other in the garages.
And
this
how's
is a
how is
party.
Kiwi
This is
Build
a
work?
party that didn't even admit or say that there was a housing crisis.
There
Now
never
they're
was a
moving
housing
like-
crisis, was there, Paul? Never?
Now they're moving like crazy to change it, and Paula Bennett's been at it as long as she can. Look, the fact of the matter is, if we can have these types of economies, but we've lost sight of the poor. And if the base question tonight is, does National deserve to win the next election, the question has to be, have they got the trust and confidence of those who I think they left behind in order to govern again? And National's challenge, if I can try and be a commentator for once and not the politician, is are they going to govern for all and not just for what seems to be the wealthy? The opposite for Labour is, are they going to be seen as a party that will govern for all, not just for those who are poor? So I think those in vulnerable communities today feel like, okay, there's people that are listening to us. But look, I get low voter turnout in Otara. We get less than 1 in 3 people vote in Otara, and that's because we're so transient. So there's been no rock star economy for the people out in South Auckland.
Damien, National's stewardship of the economy for 9 years saw free market principles soar and neoliberalism triumph. Shouldn't you just shut down ACT and embrace Paul's Milton Friedman love?
Well, I'd just like to challenge SFO a little bit. You were saying that the last, critical of the last national government. So my challenge would be, what was different about the last national government than the Clark Cullen government that preceded it? So if you have a look at what Key and English did, it was in many ways, it was a continuation of the last government. They made a couple of tinkerings at the edges, but it really was at the edges. I mean, they ran a hardcore Keynesian program for 9 years.
They
And I-
did massive tax cuts for up and income earners, where something like 94% of the gains went to the top 30% of earners. So, I mean, that's a hell of a skew.
So what was-
Well, no, I agree with Efeso. The biggest problem we face is inequality. And that's what's happened overseas, where you get people voting for clowns like Donald Trump or for Brexit. It's people who've missed out. And there are a lot of Kiwis who are missing out, not just the poorest, but middle-income Kiwis who are worried about their jobs, worried about security, worried about their kids getting ahead, and they're saying, damn the lot of you politicians, because none of you are speaking to our interests and our heart. And my worry is that the democracy that's so precious for us, in fact, across party lines, is going to be under threat if we don't address the lingering legacy of inequality. That's what we've got to fix.
But you're talking about inequality. Why not poverty? Because we've had this big shift in
Why not publish it?
in ideology where everybody is now talking about inequality. Because if you actually talk about poverty in an objective and absolute sense, we don't have
I'll
poverty
tell you
the
about.
way we did.
No,
50
look,
years ago.
I'll tell you about poverty. Poverty's not being able to buy shoes for your kids to go to school, or send them on a school trip, or having to choose between sending a sick kid to a doctor or putting food on a table. So you're absolutely right, Damien. It's not just relative inequality; it's absolute poverty.
But the sad
and we
thing-
fail on both.
But the sad
So we
thing-
So
have to
you
address
want to talk about shoes? If you want cheap shoes, this is a fantastic store called the Warehouse or Kmart, and
Where
you can
everyone
buy-
gets a
you can
bargain.
buy shoes for like $9.
And the
Well,
sad
that's
thing, and the-
fantastic. If you've got $9, Damien, some people haven't got $9. Welcome to the real world.
And the sad thing is, after 2 years of this government that was going to deal with all these issues, the queue for the food parcels at the Auckland City Mission are longer than ever, and it's primarily because rents have gone up, primarily because of the decisions that this government has made.
Look, with no disrespect to my learned colleague-
they've gone around the idea that's saying that you can add costs
It's
to
a very-
the providers of housing, and there won't be any impact.
Paul's one of life's optimists because for a national finance spokesperson, a party that presided over the greatest housing bubble New Zealand's ever seen,
not as bad as
to
the early
criticise the
2000s
current
bubble.
government, which has tried to damp it off, his policy paper says shorten the bright line test to give speculators a better tax break. That's his solution. I'm sorry, that's going in the wrong direction, Paul.
Well, I don't
Martin, when National came into power, there were 70,000 state houses. By the time they left, 62,000. That says it all.
Paul,
know what it is.
National was in the news last week with its $150,000 donation from a wealthy Chinese businessman. Now, it's alleged that you have a Chinese spy in your caucus. So when you're discussing national security issues around him, do you speak in code or do you cover your mouths? You're kind of like, okay, we're going to buy 5 tanks. Shh, he's coming. He's coming. Shut up, Paula. Shut up. Shut up.
Well,
is National more than a front for Chinese business interests?
Yeah, look, I think, with all due respect, Mr. Bradbury, I think you need to get in touch with modern Auckland and modern New Zealand, and you'll find that that where I'm based in the Epsom electorate, there's about 30 or 40 or 50% of the population that are from China, and they're Chinese, and they're perfectly entitled to be engaged in politics and to be part of parties, making donations, all those sorts of things. And so we're not in the business of assuming that anybody that comes from China is necessarily a spy.
And I'd like to
so
support
Jean's
my
done a
colleague.
great
We
job.
shouldn't be directing those criticisms at any one country, and I'm uncomfortable that we're picking on one country here. But let's go for the broader point. Any caucus that has any member in it that has been a serving member in another country's national security agency needs to ask themselves some quite hard questions. Whichever party and whichever country, I hope that the appropriate people have vetted that very carefully, because I'm sure it's come to the attention of some global policymakers.
Well, let's ask you that question, because Simon Bridges just last week met with Gao Xingkun, the head of the Chinese secret police in China. When you were the leader of the opposition, would it be acceptable for you to meet with the head of the secret police of a foreign nation?
Well, again, I think we shouldn't let ourselves get into the business where we single out a particular country or a particular government. I think what we need to accept is that the leader of any party, any major party that's involved in diplomacy, is going to meet senior leaders from a range of countries. That's part of their job description. I hope that we can take Mr. Bridges at his word, that he's raised human rights concerns with whoever he's met, because I hope that that is bipartisan in New Zealand, that we care about those things, we care about the dignity and freedom of the individual, and we care about the rule of law.
Was it concerning to see Simon sing the praises of China, particularly at a time with Hong Kong?
I think the timing was unfortunate, and I think that younger leaders sometimes get caught up in the moment. But again, I would not want to identify that as a country-specific issue.
Professor, the Jamie Lee Ross incident was very embarrassing and damaging. He's watching the live stream tonight. Hi, Jamie Lee. Any words for him before the election? Apparently, he's still got a lot of damage to do.
Yeah, I think people look in at the Jamie Lee Ross situation, and it creates more distrust of politicians, and we know that they're ranked as the people who people don't trust the most anyway.
They're above journalists.
And yeah, well, we're getting a few good ones. So,
People distrust journalists way more.
The point for Jamie Lee Ross is it makes people think, those of us who really don't care about politics, and the fact is when you're poor, you don't care. What you care about is that you can go to work, you've got a job, you've got food at home, that you can feed the kids they get to school. So when you watch the issues like Jamie Lee Ross, you start to think, gosh, can those people be trusted? Are they all one and the same? And it just is, it's a sad brandish across all politicians. People get into this, I hope, because they're genuinely concerned about making change and doing something really good in the community. This just makes people think there's a whole lot of conversations that go on in the background that we're not privy to, that we're not aware of, and it just creates a whole lot of distrust.
Hey, Martin, I think you need to be a bit more up to date. We're talking about last year's scandal. There's a scandal today.
Well, I was just
that we're
about to
talking
get onto
we should be
that.
talking about.
Thank you. Damien,
We'll get
I
to
mean,
that at
this
some
is one of the problems, isn't it? Dirty politics makes people recoil from politics. You got a current sex scandal that is engulfing the Labour Party. Do people stop paying attention and disconnect when they just think the whole thing's poisonous?
I would think it would be great if people had overwhelming contempt and loathing for politicians of all colours.
That's very hurtful.
And
That's
it's
very
interesting to see.
What's
Paul,
the alternative, Damien?
Paul, well, I'm a libertarian verging on an anarchist, so I think we can. I think that answers itself. But it's interesting.
So the answer to the question, who rules the world, is nobody does.
That would be ideal. But
Warlords,
it's
warlords.
interesting. But it's interesting. Or I mean, you're worried about Chinese spies. I mean, through Huawei, they get all the information anyway.
No,
So I think we should just
No,
relax.
you're misquoting
about
me. I
that.
said I was worried if any party had a previous or serving spy in their caucus.
But we don't need to
regardless
worry.
of who they are or where they're from.
Our Chinese overlords have all of the information anyway. So I think we can all
As
just,
much as our
we can all
American
just-
overlords, as much as our
I'm
American
sure that's
overlords.
true.
I'm
And
sure
well,
they're
they
not the
can
only
cross
one.
data
Welcome to
match.
the internet.
Don't forget the Australians.
Paul, some would say that National likes to carry a big stick when it comes to beneficiaries. Your weird drug testing of people on welfare that doesn't produce many results. You implemented cutting off welfare for the slightest reason. And then, of course, there was that $120 million that we pissed needlessly against the wall for meth testing of state houses that never fucking existed. Why is it that National kind of likes to have a go at the beneficiaries? What's going on?
Well, I'm not sure the way that you characterised it is quite accurate. I mean, the only point we're making,
Hundreds of people thrown onto the streets. They were pretty pissed off.
the only point we're making is that most New Zealanders should have the opportunity to work and contribute and have an opportunity to look after themselves and their families.
Sure.
So we have a welfare system in order to look after those in need, and we want to encourage people to move from that back into work if they have the opportunity. And
But
that's what we're trying to do.
does having a dirty, great big stick over them and the threat to bloody punish them if they don't, does that work?
Well, I mean, I think the average New Zealander would think that it's not an unreasonable expectation to say if you're on a job seeker benefit that you should be seeking work. And that's a simple thing that you should do.
if you cut someone's welfare and they've got a kid, it's the kid who's suffering, isn't it?
Well, sometimes the children suffering if their parents have been in generational dependency, and so what?
Yeah,
we're
but you're
trying
not
to-
helping it, are you, by
what-
cutting the welfare?
Well, what we're trying to do is encourage people to be able to get back into work. And so what we've got the strange situation now where unemployment's at historic low levels, and we've had a 15,000 person increase in benefits
Yep.
at the same time. And that is because this government's come in and taken away some of those basic expectations that most New Zealanders would expect.
But help me understand it, because you're a guru, a bridge builder, a consensus maker, and I just want to understand
kind of-
how it helps the kid if they get less wealthy because their mum or dad have skipped a job thing. I mean, I don't understand how that makes their life better.
It's about sending a signal from the rest of society that their expectation is that people in receipt of a benefit are looking for opportunities to.
So
be able
those
to work.
children going hungry, what signal does that send them?
It's sending a signal that society expects people to work if they have the opportunity to work, and that's not an unreasonable thing.
I think the,
David,
I think the
yep.
confusion here is not the principle that people who can work should work, but that whipping someone to get out the door where they don't have a driver's license or they don't have the gear they need for the job or the training or any childcare isn't solving the problem. So it's not the ethic of hard work that is wrong. It is the misunderstanding of what it is actually like to be a poor solo parent with dependent children trying to get a job.
And saying that it's okay not to work and not to be drug free and not prepared to turn up to job interviews is not helping anybody either.
No, and I'm
so
not
it's about
advocating
getting the right
that.
balance.
So let's get past the partisan politics where we're painting each other into corners we don't hold. I subscribe
You would
to
never do that, would you?
No, not anymore.
No, good.
I might have done it.
He's definitely
I
reformed.
might have been guilty of that once or
He's
twice.
definitely
I'm
reformed.
trying to
Just
grow up
remember
here.
that he used to, but
That's right, exactly. But look, don't take political advice from me. It didn't get me very far.
David, despite the dirty politics, despite the 200,000 kids in poverty, despite the mental health crisis, despite all that legacy from National are polling higher than any other party. Why is that happening, and what is Labor doing wrong?
That's a tough question, and I'm sure Labor's pollsters are asking themselves that question. And I'm sorry, I'm not privy to that data. What I would say is I think that the competition between the two major parties is for the middle ground. And most Kiwis ascribe to a pretty common sense set of values. They do expect people to work hard. They also expect that if you do work hard, you'll be able to save and get ahead and your children will do better than you did. And I think the great threat, not only to both the major parties, but to our democracy, is that a lot of the countries we look to have found that that's no longer true. That people work hard, play by the rules, and their families go backwards. And that's why we've got, amongst other things, Brexit.
Yeah.
That's why we've
Not in New
got-
Zealand.
Not
That's
in
the
New
point.
Zealand,
That's
thank
the point.
goodness. And sometimes I want to hug my colleagues to the left and the right because I celebrate the fact that in New Zealand we still have a good and functioning democracy. And I think it's fantastic that we can come to a pub like this without miles of security as mates and
And
we
good
can
beer.
debate the issues and good beer. So let's celebrate
To
that.
our democracy, ladies and gentlemen, to our democracy. Professor Jacinda seems to define the word transformative as whatever bare majority she can scrape together to get the most minimum thing done. Beneficiaries are still queuing outside Wins at 2 a.m. and over 12,000 are still waiting for social housing. If National win, won't it be because Labor haven't done a hell of a lot to help those voters?
Yeah, look, I get the impression that Carmel and the team are doing as much as they can to get a message of compassion. We're here to help you. Arguably, you could say that there's an increase in the amounts that is going out of WINS because now people are getting what they were first entitled to. And so maybe that's growing people's trust that they can go along to their local WINS office. You know, they've taken away the security guards. I'm over in Otara. There was always a security guard standing outside, and that person held the list as to whether or not you could come in, and you could only go in 5 or 10 minutes before your actual appointment. So people now feel like, okay, I can turn up to the local WINS office. But, you know, if you just take away, if you erode people's sense of dignity, no one's going to want to turn up. Hey, and that's what we're doing. Politicians, it's one thing to get up and say, we're going to do these things, but I'm not sure that the party that I'm a part of has been as ambitious in their actions as they have in their words. And I think they've got the time, they've got the opportunity now to really be ambitious with their actions. And I think that's what we're waiting for. The poorer communities are waiting for just that to happen. And so you've got groups like Action Against Poverty that are out there all the time, making sure and really challenging the government. The most recent conversations we've had at church is all the guys are coming up to me saying, I'm so glad it's now 5% under Kiwi Build because now I can use all of my savings. I've got enough from my Kiwi Saver. So that's a good step. But we're 2 years into a government. They had to reset. They've taken their targets away. So obviously that's going to cause a little bit of upset for people. But there's hope.
Kiwi Build was a pretty bad idea, wasn't it, Paul?
It was pretty bad. I mean, I think if you were to sum the whole Labor approach for the last 2 years, it would be to say, Labor, it's the thought that counts. And unfortunately, it's not the thought that counts. Actually, what we've seen...
Thank you, comrade.
What we're seeing is a complete lack of delivery on anything and incompetence when it comes to...
Do you think, though, it's really hard to turn the ship around after National just drove it into the ground for 9 years? I mean, it takes a lot of time to repair your damage, doesn't it?
I'm sorry, Martin, but the ship was not ground into the ground. It was going very well. The country was prospering. Yes, there's always challenges in any country.
Didn't look too prosperous.
They
looked a little,
wherever you look.
Little
but
cold.
The country was going pretty well. And what we've seen is Phil Twyford, our dear friend Phil, going out saying, what a bunch of idiots. Nobody knows anything apart from me. I'm going to fix the housing crisis. We're going to build all these houses.
He almost sounded as bad as Nick Smith,
It has been a colossal failure. And I can't recall a time in any political history where 2 years into a new government, you have seen such a colossal failure. And we don't celebrate that, of course, because we want New Zealanders to get access to cheaper housing. And what you need to be focusing on, what are the causes of that?
But also, let's not forget that the 2 a.m. outside the Winds office, that was a stunt. And also, this whole stuff about people sleeping in cars. I mean, at one point, they went to try and find some of these people sleeping in cars, and they didn't find that many of them. So this whole, oh my God, we've got this massive housing crisis and we've got thousands of people sleeping in cars. I mean, it's not true. When they actually went out looking, they found something like 150 rough sleepers in Auckland. Let's not blow this out of proportion. We actually have an incredibly comprehensive social welfare state. And if people are still lining up and can't get stuff, that's the fault of an intergenerational welfare system.
Well, look, the day after the last election, I was walking to work down Queen Street, and the homeless folks who sleep on the street,
Both of
mistakenly, no, about 20 of them actually.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a real problem. If you haven't been there, nobody in New Zealand should have to sleep on the street. Nobody, not one single person should be homeless sleeping on the street. And they got up and they said, thank God Labor's been elected, we can see some hope. But the challenge
2 years later, what's happened, though?
They're still there. They're still there. The government has voted.
Complex issue.
It is complex, but the government's voted 27 million to rebuild the Auckland City Mission to provide emergency housing for these people. So that's a start. But what I would say is, and I would challenge my colleague here, I personally would ask the question of whether a transformative government, to use your word, can have a fiscal framework, as Efeso has referred to, that declares it will run a surplus every year, except in a major meltdown. My colleague has criticised Labor for broadening the debt target from 20% to a range of 15 to 25, and I challenge Paul Goldsmith to clarify, because it was ambiguous in his paper, will National keep it at 25? Will it keep it at 20? Will it lower it? Paul, what's your position?
Well, unfortunately, the main transition that we've seen is from a quickly growing economy to a slowly growing economy. And that is not something that's going to satisfy all New Zealanders. And so that's the big issue that we have faced.
So you're going to
borrow
slowing
to fill
economy.
In the gap? No. Well,
Keynesian economics?
What we've said is we're not in the camp of Labor, which is to significantly increase debt at a time when we should be doing well. Let's not forget.
Therefore it's austerity.
Let's not forget that right now, right here, the world wants our goods and is prepared to pay good prices for it. Our terms of trade are very high. We should be booming as a country right now. And instead, growth has fallen off a cliff because of collapsing business confidence. Collapsing business confidence. No.
Damien, name 5 things that you as a right-winger like about National. 5. I dare you.
Well, actually,
One.
There's a fantastic book. What was it called? Not Eat the Rich.
I don't know, Judith Collins, my life.
We won, you lost. Now that was a
We won, you lost, eat that.
eat that. Yes, not eat the rich. So there's one thing I like.
Okay, a book.
So I mean, and
book.
more people,
You can still get it on eBay.
more people should read that book. May not help your electoral prospects.
Second thing,
I like the fact that I like Paul's campaign in Epsom.
you like Paul's campaign in Epsom, which
I
allows
think-
David Seymour to become the
That's
acting-
harder than it looks.
Right,
It's
yeah,
harder than
very
it looks.
hard, very hard.
Okay, all right. I like
Show
the fact.
considerable
I like the fact that they adopted ACT's policy about the charter schools. It would be a shame that they didn't do more of them because I think there was only 6, so
Third
that would have been nice. Yep. I like the fact that they adopted ACT's policies on the 90 days for smaller business. I think that
Fourth
was.
thing,
And the fourth
Keep
thing.
going, keep
you're
going,
kind
keep
of
going.
running out.
Yeah, I am running out of steam.
Be
Oh,
quick,
no,
yeah.
Judith Collins. Judith
Yes.
Collins, the one thing Judith Collins did, there's so many things she didn't do, like crashing cars I didn't like, but she introduced private prisons. So that it wasn't great, but it was a step in the right direction. Although
and the
they
fifth
had.
thing,
No, that was
the
5.
That was the
that was
fifth.
5.
That was 5.
Jesus.
4.
Okay.
Fuck, that was hard work.
Paul,
prisons
Judith
that
Collins
filled
is
by
writing a book. Are you scared?
No, look, but the advice that I gave to her was to keep it short.
Because you have written many books yourself.
Yeah.
How many pages do you think she'll produce?
Oh, look, it depends how big the font is. I'm looking forward to reading it.
David, Judith Collins is writing a book. Should Paul be scared?
I don't know that Paul's done too much to be scared about yet, but I'm sure in due course he'll earn that accolade.
Efeso, Judith Collins is writing a book. Should New Zealand be scared?
Yeah, I think we should all be scared, but it'll be interesting to read, and I'm sure it'll fly off the
Isn't she
Oh,
your
I'm
cousin?
not sure about that.
Yeah, well, maybe people will just take it. For,
Damien-
it'll go for $9.95, I reckon.
Damien, Judith Collins is writing a book. Should Simon Bridges be scared?
Well, I think the real question is whether Rorschach will be giving Judith Collins any emails.
Oh,
So that would be.
really? That's interesting.
I like reading my emails and books.
Paul, come 2020, will Simon Bridges still be the leader of the National Party?
Oh, absolutely.
David, come.
2021?
And you'll be Prime Minister as well.
2021?
2020, will Simon Bridges still be the leader of the National Party?
No, it is possible that leaders go into opposition leadership thinking that they might get a second
Right,
chance.
sure.
Usually that doesn't happen. Just saying.
Efeso, Simon Bridges 2020, will he still be the national leader?
Bar the Jamie Lee Ross situation,
Yes.
I think he will still be the leader. The one thing, I've got one thing that I can say nice about the National Party is they've shown great discipline. And when we were in opposition, we got rid of people as quickly as we could, but the National Party have shown really good discipline. I don't know if that's going to build trust, though.
Damien, will Simon Bridges still be the leader 2020?
I think the real question, that's not the real question. I think the question is, who will be the leader of the opposition? Because at the moment it's David Seymour.
Paul, no other political party in New Zealand history has had stratospheric polling while in opposition, but National has no mates to govern with. Who can you go into coalition with?
Well, we do have our friend David Seymour
Brian
at the
Tamaki.
moment.
Just
Saying?
And I suppose the question that we'll find out in the next year is whether somebody new arises or whether some of Labour's coalition partners fall off the perch. And that'll be the story of 2020, whether we come up with new ones or theirs fall off the perch.
could National do a deal with Bishop Brian Tamaki?
Yes.
I think they're highly unlikely, but
Highly unlikely.
that's something.
Listen to the crowd go, "Ooh."
That's something for the leader to determine.
Whoever that might be.
David,
I think he's an
doesn't-
I think he's an apostle rather than a
He
bishop.
is an
No,
apostle, that's
he's
right.
now Bishop Apostle.
David, Winston Peters doesn't like Paula Bennett, but he does like Judith Collins. Could New Zealand First and National form a government next year if she was the leader?
Look, on a serious note, it seems to me that New Zealand First is seeking to build a legacy as the party of the regions. That puts them in direct competition with National's rural base. My guess is that Mr. Peters will want to cement that legacy, and he will want to continue to exercise the considerable influence that New Zealand First currently enjoys in the regions in a second term of a Labour-led government. That will be my expectation, and it would be rational for him.
But the big question is, why is Winston Peters not coming down to Wellington on the train?
He's
Because he can't fly, but why can't he come down on the train?
An old rugby injury, I
There's
understand.
nothing stopping coming on the train.
Professor, the looming, the housing crisis, the 200,000 kids in poverty, the creaking social infrastructure, the burgeoning prison population, the legacy that Labor inherited from National, are the people ready to go back to that? Do they want more of that?
I'm not convinced that the people are ready to go back to that. But if the polls are any indication, I'm challenged by these polls because I can't quite understand if we are feeling this way towards National and feeling let down by National in 9 years of what some have regarded as neglect or described as neglect, that it would be, I thought the separation might be greater at this stage, but it's not. And the challenge for National is in the question that you asked about whether they're going to find friends to play with. And I'm not sure that the National Party were created or born on the basis of playing with other people because they were born to govern. And so that's going to be their challenge. Are they going to find people to play with? If they go with Alfred Ngaro and a deal in botany, who knows? I'm not sure. But they're going to have to turn to a conservative Christian type party if they're going to have a friend to go into coalition with outside of David Seymour, who's really just one seat for them and no use really.
Well, let's talk about that. Damien, how can ACT become the tail that wags the national dog rather than an amputated limb that nobody really wants?
Well, they already are the tail that wags the dog. I mean, if you have a look at,
Small dog.
no, it's just, it doesn't bark very much.
It's what's under the tail that counts.
If you have a look at the two policies that after the election National has been championing, the 90-day law and the charter schools, those were ACT policies. And I think the part of it you're asking question is why is National doing so well in the polls? And I think because the Labor Party has done such a good job of promoting social welfare, universal health care, and most people are saying, yes, we like those things. We trust National because they're good managers of the social welfare state, and so I think that's why people are leaning towards it.
Damien may have picked up on something here. I think most people are pretty fair-minded Kiwis. They want a thriving economy. They want a caring society. I think what I'm hearing from the business community that I'm working in now is, hey, we like Labor's values, but we want to make sure they can deliver. And I think the Prime Minister has said that herself. The challenge for Labor is to get the managerial and delivery runs on the board that prove that they are walking the talk. That is the challenge. If they can do that, they'll be a government for 3 or 4 terms.
Paul, you've got a leader who isn't rating very well, but a party that is. Why is that?
Oh, that's a pretty standard sort of situation in opposition in terms of the leader having to build his or her profile in opposition. So there's nothing unusual about that. What is unusual is the very, very high party support that we've got. And we're conscious of the fact that we need to maintain that. And we wanted, and the reason why it's so high is that we're focused on the needs of everyday New Zealanders.
Just to be a
We're
tad-
concerned about sort of high petrol prices. They're concerned about the cost of living. They're concerned about the slowing economy. All these things, and the lack of progress on transport infrastructure is a colossal issue in this city. They came in. What did they do? They cancelled a whole lot of projects that were ready to go and replaced them with a whole lot of projects that aren't ready to go. And so we're not making any progress on the things that matter to New Zealanders, and that's why our support is so
David,
high.
I'm no fan of the National Party, but by
Well,
God,
you should be.
they
It's time to
are
change.
polling so bloody high. Why?
Well, let's start with the leader and a little historical fact. There's probably no precedent since the earliest days of Helen Clark for an opposition leader to poll quite at the level that Mr. Bridges is. And I think
That is a precedent. That is the
that
precedent.
is
That is
the
the
only
precedent.
one I can think
And
of.
Jim Bolger.
Really?
Yeah, he was behind Winston Peters, remember?
In the very, very early
of course,
days.
of course.
In the very early days. So he's certainly got a big hill to climb, and
Yep.
history's probably against that. Why is National at the levels that it is? It has a significant rural vote. They are seen as competent managers. And I think what New Zealanders want, ideally, is Labor's values with a track record of management.
Oh, nonsense.
And so Labor has the opportunity to build that delivery, and if they
Nonsense.
can show that, they will keep the Treasury benches. If they can't, it's anybody's guess.
Efeso, why is National just so high in the polls?
Yeah, look, I think a lot about what I am calling the middle-class professional Pacific drift. And that drift is going to National because a lot of ethnic communities, Pacific communities think, I'm educated now, I went to university, and now I need to look like what success, good managerial governance looks like, and that's the National Party. So we're getting that drift, and that's happening in our own community where people are saying, well, I'm going to vote National because I feel like I'm doing better now. What we're trying to encourage our people is to understand what does it mean to walk away from some of those values. So I agree with David on that, in that regard, is that you can have both, but we've got to be honest about who we really want to be. And I think there's a theology within the Pacific that suggests we should become like them, and that there's lots of them. You look at their ethnic diversity when it comes to Pacific, you just got Agnes in, and she was, number 1,006. So
great
they've had
woman
to
too.
go a long way down the list to get to the next Tongan person. So that's the challenge we have as a community.
Damien, more people believe that Elvis is still alive than believe in Simon Bridges, yet the polling is so incredibly high. Why?
Have we learnt nothing? Polls just don't matter. I mean, about 6 weeks ago, we got 2 polls on the same day with vastly different results. So it's an old trope. The only poll that matters is the one on election day. I mean, you saw Brexit. You saw David Cameron's election. You saw the result in the United States where Trump unexpectedly won. I just don't have a lot of confidence that the polls that we're seeing or that are out to the side and we're not seeing but are being leaked, I don't know that we should place too much emphasis on what those are.
Final round of questions. Paul, does National deserve to win 2020?
Absolutely, and we want to have the opportunity to basically restore confidence, revive the economy, and lift our aspirations as a country, both of what we can achieve and also the long-term challenges we can overcome. And we're really looking forward to that opportunity.
David Cunliffe, does National deserve to win 2020?
The party that deserves to win in 2020 is the party that will address inequality and deprivation, that will preserve the best parts of our democracy, and fight climate change and environmental degradation. Whoever that party is the party that deserves to win.
Amen. Sing it from the mountaintop, brother. Bess?
I don't think they've completely won the trust of the nation yet, and I think that people will give Labour a second chance. Whether that means they deserve it or not, I think is completely, it's probably not the question because it's a trust issue at the moment. I think people are keen to give Labour a second chance, and it might be more that than it is whether they deserve to be in
So
power.
today.
Damien, you wake up each morning, you look in the mirror and you scream taxes theft. Does National deserve to win 2020 when they want to tax just as badly as you?
Well, if the question was, would the country be better off under Paul Goldsmith and Simon Bridges than Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson, I think quite clearly the country will be better off under Simon Bridges and Paul Goldsmith because they are exceptionally competent managers of the welfare state. But the question is, do they deserve to win? And if you assess National by its own standards, personal responsibility and individual freedom, then no, I think National need to go back. They need to apologise for what they did under Keir English in the same way as the Labour Party apologised for Rogernomics. They need to draw a line in the sand and they need to embrace their inner core beliefs of personal responsibility.
Sellouts, all of them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this evening. Do not forget, brothers and sisters, next week, Hub Politics 3, Tuesday, 17th September, 8 p.m, live stream here from the Chapel Bar. The debate is the Auckland Mayoralty debate with the Lord Mayor, Bill Goff, and his main challenger, John Tamahiri. Thank you, New Zealand. We will see you again next week. Hooray!
Very good. Oh, that's good.
I got to defend money.